Welcome to this week's programme.
I'm Jahawi Batoli, eco-filmmaker and wildlife specialist.
And I'm Ella Meek, co-founder of charity Kids Against Plastic and all-round animal lover.
Welcome to our weekly update on the health of the planet and its animals.
This is The Pulse. Coming up on today's programme.
Is the world's widest glacier about to collapse with huge consequences for the planet?
The President of Indonesia revokes land use permits for loggers, miners and palm oil plantation owners, potentially saving up to 2.5 million hectares of rainforest.
As we know, the planet is losing its animals. Are plants next?
And we'll be sharing some of this week's more bizarre eco and wildlife related stories.
Hey Ella.
Hi Jahawi, it's good to see you again. What have you been up to this week?
Well, this last week I returned to a place called Thwaites, which is where I spent a lot of my childhood on the coast. And we're planning actually on moving back to set up a new marine conservation project there.
Oh, that's so cool. What will the project be about?
Well, when we were snorkeling the other day, I noticed that the coral growth and reef life was just so beautiful, but there were no fish. So we want to work with the local community to try and create a no fishing zone with the hope of bringing back that whole ecosystem to the benefit of the coral reef and the community.
That sounds amazing, and I'm sure it will be a very rewarding project, so you'll have to keep us updated on how it all goes.
Of course, I'll definitely keep you updated.
So what news have you been drawn to this week?
I've been fascinated by the research coming out on the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. It's the world's widest glacier and approximately the size of Great Britain. And research suggests that because of global warming, it may collapse and melt in as little as 5 years.
That sounds really serious.
Indeed. To find out more, I spoke to Dr. Ella Gilbert from the University of Reading, who is a climate scientist and Antarctic expert. Hi Ella, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
What are the warning signs that suggest the Thwaites Glacier is melting and collapsing?
Well, Thwaites Glacier has been undergoing a lot of change in recent decades, and at the moment it's the most rapidly changing glacier in Antarctica. So we're seeing that the speed of the glacier has accelerated. In fact, it's doubled in the last 30 years. And at the moment it's contributing about 4% to global sea level rise. So it's basically spitting out a lot of ice into the oceans. It's also getting thinner. So the front of the glacier where it meets the ocean is getting thinner, and it's also developing cracks.
The massive Thwaites Glacier has been labelled the Doomsday Glacier. If it does collapse, what impact will it have on the planet?
So Thwaites has earned this name in the media and kind of generally because it has the potential to contribute around 65 centimetres to global sea levels. Now, even if it kind of rapidly started to destabilise today, that wouldn't be seen immediately. It would still take, hundreds of years for that 65 centimetres of sea level rise to be seen. But the reason that scientists are particularly concerned about Thwaites is because there's some indication that it might act as a kind of keystone glacier, so that if it starts to be lost, essentially, if it starts to really rapidly accelerate and disappear, then it could drag other glaciers in the region with it. Now, I should hasten to add that we don't know that Thwaites is definitely going to have this effect, and it could not have that keystone role. And also, even if it did, it wouldn't happen over a very short amount of time. It would still be, centuries worth of change.
Have any other glaciers in Antarctica ever melted before?
Yep, so we've seen sea level rise of around 25 centimetres since about 1880. And a lot of that, about half of that is from melting glaciers, and that's in Greenland as well as Antarctica. The rest is from the thermal expansion of the seas. Other glaciers have kind of rapidly accelerated and thinned, particularly in Greenland, but nothing on the scale of Thwaites. The number one thing we should be focusing on is reducing emissions. It is mitigating and preventing the worst effects of climate change, because that's the only surefire way that we know we can avoid the worst impacts of climate change.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you for your time today.
Pleasure.
Ella, take a look at this.
Oh my gosh! I was not expecting that at all. I hope the customer's okay.
Luckily he is. He just got away with some wounds to his leg.
So what's actually going on here?
According to local sources, the buffalo escaped from an abattoir in the city of Taizhou, just north of Shanghai in China. The buffalo then ran into a restaurant and charged the unknowing customer.
Whoa.
Buffalo can be extremely dangerous. African buffalo are even known to attack and kill lions.
So Jahawi, last week the President of Indonesia announced that he's revoking hundreds of land use permits for logging, mining and palm oil plantations.
That sounds like good news.
Yeah, it can possibly save up to around 2.5 million hectares of rainforest, and this land could then be restored and returned to indigenous people.
Are there any potential drawbacks?
Unfortunately, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry announced on television that new permits could be issued to business and investors if their revised proposals for the land were considered serious and sensible.
That seems less promising for conservation then.
Indeed. Earlier, to get my head around it, I spoke to Philip Jacobson, a Mongabay Bay journalist and expert on the region. Hi Philip, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here. Thanks.
So the President of Indonesia has revoked hundreds of land use permits for logging, mining and palm oil plantations. How come he's done this?
It's a very tricky question. So President Joko Widodo signed a moratorium on the issuance of new permits for palm oil plantations. Indonesia is the world's biggest palm oil producer. And he also mandated a review of existing palm oil plantation permits. So his administration, was supposed to be spending the last 3 years kind of reviewing all the existing permits and potentially coming up with permits that should be revoked. So this recent set of permit revocations, which was announced on January 5th, seems to be one step in that process. But the big question is, how much rainforest will this actually save, right? Or how much land that was previously in the hands of corporate developers will be put in the hands of local communities. So the short answer is we don't really know yet. It could end up saving a lot of rainforest, or it could actually hasten the destruction of some areas of rainforest.
By revoking its land use permits, is Indonesia sending a message to its Southeast Asian neighbours?
You might say that. These revocations, they're potentially good first step from the perspective of rainforest conservation. I think if Indonesia follows through and puts some of these lands in the hands of local communities or zones them for conservation or what have you, that would really send a message to other countries in the region. There's just so many companies who's are touched by these revocations. Many of them will be trying to hang on to their lands in the coming period of time. There's going to be probably backroom deals going on. There will be legal challenges from some of these companies. And then also, there's tons and tons of community groups, NGOs who work to protect rainforests and other environmentally significant areas. So their fate is very much up in the air right now. So we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Philip. It's been great speaking to you.
Thanks for having me.
So Jahawi, can you guess what's going on here?
I have no idea what's going on there.
Well, actually, the goldfish is controlling the direction of travel of the tank.
This seems very strange to me.
I know what you mean. Researchers at Ben Gurion University in Israel have created and programmed a vehicle that travels in whichever direction the fish swims. This is part of wider research into whether goldfish can navigate in unfamiliar environments.
A question on everyone's mind.
I know, right?
So, what's the outcome?
Well, researchers have found that goldfish can identify and reach a visual target while navigating in unfamiliar environments. This is evidence that goldfish have the cognitive ability to perform complex tasks.
Well, we have long assumed goldfish to be unintelligent, but I guess this disproves that.
Yeah, for sure. So Jahawi, as you know, there are thousands of endangered animal species and wildlife populations continue to dwindle across the world.
Of course.
Well, new research has shown that as animal numbers decrease, it's having an impact on plant numbers too.
Well, that's concerning, as there are already thousands of plant species that are considered critically endangered. So, how does this new research and the decline in animal numbers link to the decline in plants?
Well, half of all plant species rely on animals to disperse their seeds. So with a reduction in the number of animals, it's more difficult for plants to disperse their seeds and grow. To find out more, I spoke to Evan Frick, the scientist behind this research. Hi Evan, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me here.
Your recent research has shown that a reduction in mammals and birds is in turn reducing plant numbers too. How widespread is this problem though? Is it something that you're seeing more in certain places?
So it's a phenomenon that's really happening all over the world. And that's due to the extinction as well as the range contraction of seed disperser species. So that is pretty striking because we're seeing that ecosystems perhaps have only lost a few % of their bird and mammal species, but we estimate that there's been a 60% reduction of this ability for plants to keep pace with climate change. They're losing their ability to expand into the new habitats that will be suitable under climate change. And so if you were to lose animals from ecosystems, you cut off those processes, and that means that plants are less able to regenerate and respond dynamically to these changes in their environment or adapt to new environments.
What are the potential knock-on effects if the plant species that you've researched become extremely rare or extinct?
If you lose seed dispersers and the plant species that rely on those seed dispersers can't keep pace with climate change, they're going to be stuck in ecosystems that are not suitable for their growth, survival, and reproduction. And that sets up the potential for those not only plant biodiversity to decline, but even the carbon stored by those plant species. If that carbon is lost to the atmosphere, that has the potential to speed up climate change.
It is very alarming to hear about. Are there any solutions to this problem?
We can think about actively restoring seed dispersers back to the landscape. So facilitating their natural reintroduction into their historic habitats, actively reintroducing species into their historic habitats. I think that those are some of the things that can really support our plant communities while also supporting the animal biodiversity that exists within those forests and other vegetation communities.
Thanks very much, Evan. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Pleasure talking with you.
And finally, the Indian government is planning on reintroducing cheetahs after being extinct for 70 years.
I had no idea there ever were cheetahs in India.
Yeah, previously cheetahs were found throughout the Indian subcontinent. Now, the plan is to introduce firstly 10 to 12 individuals from southern Africa into the Kunopalpura National Park in central India.
That sounds really interesting. Let's hope it all goes well.
Indeed, we'll keep an eye on that one.
I think that's about all we have time for. I've got some homework to do.
Well, thank God my days of homework are over.
Yeah, lucky you. Bye.
Bye.